Welcome back, folks. MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. We're looking at win rates. We're going to be looking at, for this particular video, the standard best of one ladder. If you're looking for standard best of three, explore, historic, whatever formats or events on Arena that require decks, you can check out the playlist. We try to cover each during the week. Cover a bunch of different options and stuff like that that have been doing well. Similarly, like there's the Arena Championship, highlighted those decks. Everything you need meta-wise will be in the playlist meta breakdown, so you can check those out each week. So as you see on the screen, we're getting the data from Untap.gg. It's a companion tool that runs alongside the Arena client, tracks win rates, loss rates of the people who use the application. So you can track your own win rates. The link is in the video description if you want to get going. Helps you kind of see what's good, what's not, kind of go from there. And we are looking Diamond to Mythic rank from March 12th through the 19th, and we're looking at 120,000 game sample size in terms of volume of games played. So we're going to jump in and we're going to detail each of these decks and kind of go over some of the trends and changes and stuff like that. But a quick kind of note that I've been asking folks as we go through these videos. I'm on a quest for 10,000 subs on YouTube by June. It is middle of March. And I am closing in on 8,000, so appreciate if you can drop a sub. It's free, it's easy. You just click the button, and it helps out the channel. And if you have subbed, thank you. Likes and comments also greatly appreciated. It just helps with the whole grand YouTube algorithm overlord. But we'll jump into it. The top deck this week is Mono White Aggro at 66%. So there's kind of two versions of this Mono White Aggro. There's the Mono White Soldiers list, which is a Soldiers tribal deck. Basically just playing synergies with Soldiers, as it seems. And then this Mono White deck, which does have some Soldiers in it, but it's more of a Phyrexian Vindicator, Steel Seraph, kind of individually good cards that happen to be white creatures, and in some instances are Soldiers. So Vindicator is a big payoff in like the Mono Red decks. Basically any deck that doesn't have exile or direct removal, anything that's damage-based removal, or just some decks just don't have removal to begin with, this kind of just runs away with the game. On its face value, 4 mana, 5/5, with flying, good stats, closes out the game quick, but it can also just soak up huge amounts of damage from your opponent, redirect, and either throw it to your opponent's face or pick off their creatures as needed. You also have Steel Seraph, which really helps in these race situations, either giving you something like Vigilance. So say with the Vindicator, offense, defense, you can attack in with the Vigilance, but then also hold it back to block. The Lifelink also can help swing matches in that regard. Oftentimes this is cast for 3 mana, so while it is 6, you can cast it for its prototype and get all the abilities. And you're really playing it more for the abilities than you would be playing it as a 5/4 flyer versus a 3/3 flyer. In the 1-drop slot, you have Hopeful Initiate, which grows and lets you destroy artifacts and enchantments. A lot of incidental artifacts and enchantments going around, especially with like Phyrexia and Brothers War, lots of artifacts. Lay Down Arms is just a scalable removal spell. You're playing 22 planes, so this can pick off a number of different creatures. Kind of going from there. Your other removal in the deck is Brutal Cathar, which is kind of temporary because they can kill the Brutal Cathar, but does allow you to have 7 pieces of proactive or just cheap removal in the deck. Skrelv is protection spell, as well as giving you also kind of pseudo unblockable, because you can give it protect or hexproof from color of the choice. It also has the condition that it can't be blocked for this turn. So notably, hexproof is not protection. So if you like block a creature or it gets blocked by a creature, and then you activate it, it doesn't actually prevent it from dying. Protection gives you protection from the damage. Hexproof just means it can't be targeted by spells. Then we have Guardian of Nubenalia, pseudo indestructible, with the condition of you discarding a card. Also can let you enlist some of your creatures, so something like Skrelv if you're not going to be protecting, or Hopeful Initiate, just something that, like, if you're not attacking for that turn, to give indestructible. There's also kind of that interaction where you can give Vigilance, attack, and then no, actually you can't because you're already in combat. Scratch that. But it lets you scry and kind of get some value. Your Lord effect is Intrepid Adversary to kind of pump up your team. Also just a lifelinker sometimes on 2 can help you race against some of the more aggressive decks. Adelin's one of the big payoffs of just being this Mono White Aggro, where Soldiers doesn't have like Adeline in itself. Just a really powerful card, seeing play in Pioneer. Explore, and then it's some historic decks as well. Just kind of go wide, putting a lot of pressure on your opponent. The next deck is Azorius Soldiers. I actually went Mythic rank only on this one because the Diamond to Mythic rank had like Rescue Retriever and just looked like someone just had a bunch of cards that said Soldiers and threw them together. This list looked a lot more refined, so I just don't want people to craft like wild cards on cards that just don't see play and aren't that good. So the Soldiers deck, very similar in terms of being an aggressive deck. However, you have the Soldier synergy. So your payoffs of being Soldiers are things like Valiant Veteran to give a boost to your team. Siege Veteran acts as insulation when your soldier dies. You get another Artifact Soldier. The Sky Strike Officer can allow your soldiers to draw you cards. You have things like Harbin, which cares about 5 soldiers attacking, because then you get a boost in terms of evasion. You also have Fortified Beachhead, which both can come into play untapped when you reveal a soldier, basically every creature in your deck. And it also gives a boost in terms of your power. Similarly, Secluded Courtyard cares about being a multicolor land for your soldiers. I've said this in the past weeks, but you should be playing the blue-white fast line from Phyrexia in place of like an island and like 3 planes. It's good to just have that. You don't really need the island on one. You're not really playing blue on one. So I would play that, I would say. This deck here is on the single Denic. We're also seeing Protect the Negotiators as a counterspell here. Given the low number, it's an interesting inclusion. It can protect you in that sense, but I would probably just be more proactive, play some Denics. Just the lifelink helps against the mono red decks and stuff like that. And you're generally going to want to tap out most turns and just kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4. So something to consider there. This version's also on my rel as kind of a top end threat that if it does connect, basically a must answer, otherwise it kind of takes over the game on its own. We then move to Grixis Midrange, 62% will give a rounding boost. So this is a deck that's much better in best of 3, just because a lot of Grixis can be built in so many different ways that you can really configure your deck to beat any deck. But a lot of that comes from a sideboard. In best of 1, you kind of have to approach it in the sense of, okay, what do I want to hedge against? So the core of the deck is usually built around Blood Tithe Harvester, Corpse Appraiser, Fable the Mirrorbreaker, and Sheoldred. In the best of 3 versions, you'll see some on Invokes, some on Blade Coil Serpent, some on the Gix command. So this version is on Invoke Despair. It also just goes to show how good the mana is when you can play a 4 black spell in your 3-color deck. But Gix command provides a sweeper, also just incidental life gain, and lets you rebuy your stuff. Just a variety of removal, cut down, abrade, go for the throat, some copies of Make Disappear, a single Bank Buster. I think this configuration probably makes more sense for best of 1. A lot of the folks bring in their best of 3 version, which can have upwards of 4 Bank Busters in it, which for a best of 1 format is too slow. You oftentimes need to be able to have like proactive plays on turns 1, 2, 3, 4, just because like mono red soldiers, they're not going to take a break. They're going to keep putting pressure on you. And then you have Brotherhood's End, which is a nice sweeper to just kind of catch things up. And then the Graveyard Trespasser is some more incidental life gain in the game. Then move to Naya Humans. And by the way, I'll post all these deck lists, so don't worry. They'll be in the video description. You can copy and paste them to your heart's content. So Naya Humans, 61%. So this is another white-based aggro deck. It does incidentally have a human tribal set theme. So while the other one was soldiers, this one's humans. And we have a lot of the same creatures. So Hopeful Initiate, Intrepid Adversary, Thalias, Brutal Cathars, Adelin's in here. But we also get access to Anointed Peacekeeper as a tax style effect to kind of look at your opponent's hand, get them that way there, maybe screw them up on their curve or removal spell, something of that nature. You have Malira, which incidentally shuts down the poison decks, which we'll cover shortly. And also can be kind of a insulation in terms of removal. If they try to kill your Adeline, you can get it back by sacrificing the Malira. Catilda is a 1-of here, can be used to help you ramp through your creatures, and also just late game have a mana sink to pump up your creatures. Honestly, I would probably just play another Intrepid Adversary. You're not ramping like too high on the curve, and you want to attack with your creatures in this deck. So I think I would go just the Intrepid Adversary, just the 4th copy, lets you be more aggressive, which is what you want. There's Halana and Alana here, which basically turns any of your creatures. So this is where we're getting like the advantage of red and green. Halana and Alana will give a boost haste as well as counters. So it's really good with something like any other creature you cast after this just becomes a really big threat. It helps you kind of outscale your opponent's creatures. You also have Sigarda, which is a lord for your creature for all your humans. While Sigarda herself is not a human, it is the lord for the humans, and it also has Coven, which allows you to potentially get some card advantage once you have different powers in play. With the mana base, you have Plaza Heroes to help fix for the colors of these, a Secluded Courtyard naming humans, and then a bunch of duels. We then go to Mono Red Aggro. So this is 61% win rate, 1,200 matches, so very heavily played deck in the format. This is just a very aggressively slanted deck, and this is one of the reasons why I was saying with like Grixis, you can't be playing Bankbuster on 2 and not doing anything, because your opponents can be playing either a bunch of haste creatures, a bunch of burn, Squeed basically makes a bunch of tokens, Raiju puts counters and deals incidental damage, 10 pieces of burn that can either, so 8 of them can go face, Strangle is just a flexible removal spell for 1 mana, and then you have the option to flash them back as well. Feldon makes blocks uncomfortable. You have some prowess and evasion, and then this version's on 2 Mishra's Foundries to also kind of go over the top. In best of 3, this deck's actually kind of been innovating and trying out Furnace Punisher in the 3-drop slot. So that's the 3 mana 3/3 menace that at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if they have more than 4, or they don't have 2 basics, I think they take 2 damage. So it's just kind of a greedy mana-based Punisher kind of style effect that is also harder to block given that it is the 3/3. It also doesn't get hit by Cut Down, which is notable, where Squee does. So then moving on, we have Selesnya Aggro. So again, very similar to that of the Naya Humans deck. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I'll paste this deck list. You're basically just cutting off the red to have Kylo's Reconstruction, a little bit cleaner mana base. You also have Recruitment Officer in here. I think all things considered, if you're going to be going this route, it costs you pretty much nothing to have Halana, and Halana's better to me than some of these other cards. It's just such a big power upgrade. So I'll leave this one here. I'll paste the deck list if you're interested, but I'm not going to go too deep into this. It's pretty much the same kind of conversation. We then go to Selesnya Toxic, 59. We're going to get 60%. So this is a aggressive Toxic deck. So you're trying to win through Toxic damage. Again, this list here, the mana base, you do have you're playing a little bit more in terms of basics because it's trying to support ossification. I'm going to paste a different deck list just with the improved mana base. This deck should be playing copies of the Myrex, which it currently doesn't. And it should be playing Soul Partition. That's a card that allows you to be more proactive in terms of either targeting your opponent's stuff or targeting your own with the Rot Priest out. While there is some elements of the Rot Priest being a way to put poison counters, there's a lot of ways just through creature combat to put poison counters on your opponent's deck. So you have Crawling Chorus, that leaves you 2 bodies behind. You have your Skrull's Hive, which keeps making bodies and then also incidentally gives you lifelink. Slaughter Singer, Toxic 2, and then gives your other toxic creatures +1 boost. Seed Core gives a boost. The Myrex in the mana base is the one that makes, for 3 mana, you can make Phyrexian Mites, and then you have Bloated Contaminator to proliferate, and Eccentric as some removal. So the deck's pretty much the same. Basically, the change is you cut the Ossification, you cut the Tamiyo's Safekeeping, you play 4 Soul Partitions, the 2 mana Exile, and then you play 4 Murex in the mana base. 3 to 4 Murex. Sometimes they play 4 Seed Core, but I'll paste that list. It's pretty much the same, but it's a more refined mana base. Ossification is not where you want to be in this deck. You still only have 10 basics out of the 23, so there's a chance you'll get more utility out of the Murex than a 2 of Ossification that's still taxing your mana base even further kind of thing. So keep that in mind. We then go to Gruul Aggro, 58%. So this is an oil aggro modify style deck. So it's kind of base red aggro. You're getting with green Audacity to give +2 boost to trample and then a card draw when it leaves the battlefield. So kind of a Rancor adjacent aura. You have Eater of Virtue that keeps keywords on when things die. Also triggers for the modify condition. And the reason you're playing Modify is for Kami's Flare that deals with creature and deals 2 damage to your opponent. as well as Thundering Raiju, which gives a boost as well. Oil Adaptive gets bigger when you cast bigger creatures. Just by the base, having an oil counter on a creature is considered modified, so it will trigger. Kumano puts counters. Swiftspear gets bigger when you cast instants or sorceries or like non-creatures. The Swiftspear is actually interesting in this deck. You don't have a huge amount. I guess 10, 9, 13. It's probably fine. It's kind of just like mono red with some extra like chunker creatures in here. The Yavimaya Iconoclast is in here. You could look at cards like Niglos as well in the 3-drop slot. There's the 2-mana 3/3 legendary Tajar that can come in here. There's Beastmaster you can look at. So there's a couple other cards you could consider in here, but this, if you're looking to play some aggressively slanted Gruul decks, is a consideration. And then lastly, we have Esper Legends. So this version here looks slightly dated. Most of them have cut the Ashnot. Just play Skrelv in place. So this little mite is a legendary creature. It lets you play it on one. This Esper Legend deck has so many different ways to build it. There's like the Wedding Announcement version. There's the heavy 2-drop version. This version's playing up to AO. We have Sheoldred in this version here. The Toulouse is actually really nice just to kind of keep you up with some card advantage. I like the access of Harbin in here, or Denick, just being an incidental life linker that, like, if you curve out like Denick into Rafine and then you put counters on Denick, it can really help you in terms of racing. The interaction of Rafine and Sheoldred, just drawing new cards, gaining you a bunch of life, also has a lot of utility. Given the best of one format, like Skrelv's probably beneficial here. You might want to cut down to a copy of the Jadar, just trim on that, play like a 3rd Skrelv maybe, or like trim on a Jadar, trim on a Harbin, and then either play like 2 more Go for the Throats or some number of cut downs in addition. The format in best of one is a little bit more aggressive, and for you to do like really a turn 2 play, and then like your turn 2 is not really something blocking per se on the play, makes you a little bit susceptible to some of these aggressive decks. Also, just in terms of the mana base, you could look to just to update. We have the newer lands that came out, so something like Dark Slick Shores just helps out the mana base there. Similarly with the blue-white fast land as well, just updating those numbers. So what I can do is I'll also link a best of 3 version if you're interested in looking at something like that. That's a Wedding Announcement based version of the deck. But again, there's a lot of different ways you can build this deck if you are interested in the Legends kind of archetype. But this is you could kind of configure it. There's so many things you could put into it, so you can really choose how you want to attack the meta in that respect. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll catch you next time, and stay safe out there. Thanks for watching.